The day I destroyed Jack Creighton, I didn't use a lawyer. I used a chainsaw, a bucket of pig slop, and a live stream with 4,000 viewers. You think those stumps were an accident? I hollered into my phone, walking backwards as he charged at me. You crazy bitch, he roared, manure dripping off his $300 haircut. I cranked the chainsaw and pointed it at the biggest stump on my land. Say it again, Jack. Say it one more time, and I'll carve your face into this stump and sell mushrooms out of your mouth for $9 a pound. He lunged. I stepped aside. He went face first into the slop. And somewhere in Coldwater Reach, my dead husband was laughing his ass off. But 6 months before that afternoon, I was just a widow with a busted fence, a pile of giant stumps, and no idea how to fight back. The stumps arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were when I let myself cry. Mondays I worked. Wednesdays I fought with the bank. Thursdays I fixed what was broken. Fridays I drank exactly 2 beers on the porch and talked to Ben's empty chair. But Tuesdays, I gave myself permission to fall apart for exactly 1 hour. 7 to 8 in the morning. Then I pulled myself together and got back to work. That Tuesday, I didn't get my hour. The sound hit first. A deep, grinding rumble that vibrated up through the floorboards of the kitchen, rattling the coffee mug in my hand. The one with the Air Force logo that Ben had bought at a gas station in Nevada. I set it down and watched the dark liquid shiver. Then came the crashing. Not one crash. A sequence of them. Heavy. Rhythmic. Like a giant was pounding his fist into the earth. I ran outside without shoes. The cold bit into the soles of my feet. Sharp little rocks. Frozen grass. I didn't feel any of it. I just stood at the edge of my pasture, my mouth hanging open like a broken gate. 2 flatbed trucks were pulled up along the fence line. The one Ben had rebuilt 3 summers ago. The one where I'd held the posts while he drove the nails, complaining the whole time about my crooked measurements. The trucks were dumping giant tree stumps onto my land. Massive things. Some of them 6 feet across. Roots sprawling out like dead octopus arms. Dirt still clinging to them. Fresh cut wood gleaming white and raw in the morning sun. Hey! I screamed. The word came out thin and useless. Swallowed by the diesel roar of the trucks. Hey! Nothing. I ran toward the nearest truck. Gravel and frozen grass and something sharp that sliced the ball of my foot. I kept running. A man in a dirty orange vest was standing by the cab, clipboard in hand, watching the hydraulic lift tip another stump onto the growing pile. What the hell do you think you're doing? I grabbed his arm. He turned. Looked at me. Looked at my bare feet. Looked at my face. Then he smiled. Not a big smile. Just a small, practiced thing. The kind of smile you give a child who's asking a question they're too young to understand. Delivery, he said. Creighton contract. Delivery of what? These aren't mine. Property owners responsible for wood waste removal. County Ordinance 7-14. He said it like he was reading from a menu. Flat. Bored. Already turning away. I didn't order any wood waste. Didn't say you ordered it. Said you're responsible for it. He climbed into the cab. The door slammed. The truck rumbled away down the dirt road, leaving behind a cloud of dust and 37 giant tree stumps piled on my dead husband's pasture. I stood there for a long time. The blood from my cut foot was mixing with the dirt, making little mud patties between my toes. I could feel the cold now. Really feel it. Creeping up my legs. Settling into my knees. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone. Dialed the number for Creighton Logging. Creighton Industries, how may I direct your call? Her voice was sweet. Professionally sweet. The kind of sweet that costs $12 an hour and comes with a headset. This is Maggie Tully. Your trucks just dumped a load of stumps on my property. I want them removed. Today. I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Tully. Let me transfer you to our land management department. Click. Hold music. Some country song about a dog and a truck and a girl who got away. Click. Land management. This is Maggie Tully. Your truck's dumped stumps on my. Yes, ma'am. We're aware of the situation. Under County Ordinance 7-14, wood waste generated within a 15-mile radius may be distributed to designated receiving properties. Your property was designated last month. Designated by who? By the property owner of record. I am the property owner of record. A pause. Papers shuffling. I show the owner of record as Benjamin Tully. The name hit me like a slap. Benjamin Tully died 12 months ago. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. You'll need to file a change of ownership with the county assessor's office. Until then, the designation stands. The line went dead. I stood there in my bare feet, bleeding onto the frozen ground, holding a silent phone, staring at 37 tree stumps that apparently belonged to my dead husband. The wind picked up. It cut through my thin shirt. I started to shiver. And then I started to laugh. Not a happy laugh. Not a sane laugh. The kind of laugh that comes when you've been punched so many times that one more hit just seems ridiculous. The kind of laugh that makes your neighbors peek through their curtains and wonder if you've finally cracked. Maybe I had. I walked back to the house. Left bloody footprints on the porch. Sat down at the kitchen table. Poured cold coffee into my Air Force mug. And called Charlene. Creighton dumped 37 stumps on my pasture, I said. Excuse me? You heard me. Why? Because he wants my land. Because Ben's name is still on the deed. Because I've been too busy trying not to drown to file the paperwork. Pick one. Charlene was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then, I'll pull the county records. Give me an hour. Charlene Baker had been my best friend since the 4th grade, when she'd punched Tommy Granger in the nose for calling me a ranch rat and then blamed it on a door. She was short, loud, and allergic to bullshit. She worked in the county records office, which meant she knew where every skeleton in Coldwater Reach was buried, and she had copies of the maps. She called back in 40 minutes. It's worse than you think, she said. Ordinance 7-14 is real. It was passed 3 months ago. Creighton proposed it at a county meeting. Said it was about responsible wood waste management and supporting rural land restoration. The vote was 4-1. Let me guess. Creighton's brother-in-law is on the county board. 2 of them. Plus a cousin. I rubbed my thumb against my wedding ring. The gold was worn thin on the underside. Ben had bought it at a pawn shop in Texas when we were both stationed at Lackland. He proposed with it in a Waffle House at 2 in the morning, both of us still in uniform, high on coffee and youth and the impossible certainty that nothing bad would ever happen to us. Mag? You still there? What else? He's been buying up properties all along the creek. 4 farms in the last year. The Andersons. The Millers. Old Mr. Kowalski. Everyone but you. Why everyone but me? Because you said no. Twice. And because your land sits right on top of the deepest part of the aquifer. Or at least that's what the Geological Survey says. The one Creighton commissioned last spring. I stood up. Walked to the window. Looked out at the pasture. At the stumps. At Ben's tool shed, still exactly as he'd left it. The door slightly ajar. His work gloves hanging on the hook. The faint smell of motor oil and sawdust that still clung to the air even after a year. He wants me to sell. He wants you to go broke and then sell. The stumps are just the opening move. Make it impossible to use your own land. Run down your savings fighting it. Then swoop in with a lowball offer and a smile. How much did he offer the Andersons? Market value. But only after they'd spent 18 months and $40,000 in legal fees. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. So I'm supposed to just roll over? I didn't say that. Good. Because I've got 37 stumps and a very bad attitude. I'll figure something out. Meg. I'll call you back. I hung up before she could argue. Not because I was angry. Because I was about to cry, and I wasn't going to do that on the phone. Not with Charlene. Not with anyone. I gave myself 5 minutes. Sat on the kitchen floor. Let the tears come. Let my shoulders shake. Let the ugly sounds out. Then I wiped my face with a dish towel, stood up, and walked to the shed. The door stuck. It always stuck. Ben had been meaning to fix it. The hinge was bent. I shoved it with my hip the way he used to. It groaned open. His tools were all there. Wrenches hanging in order of size. Socket set in its red metal case. The table saw he'd rebuilt from scrap parts. And in the corner, under a dusty tarp, his chainsaw. A steel 20-inch bar. He'd named it Bertha. I pulled off the tarp. Hey, Bertha, I said. We've got work to do. She started on the third pull. That deep, angry buzz that vibrated up through your arms and into your teeth. The smell of gasoline and bar oil. The weight of her in my hands. Solid. Familiar. Ben's hands had held this saw 1,000 times. I carried Bertha out to the pasture. The first stump was the biggest. Maybe 7 feet across. Pine, I thought. Or maybe fir. I didn't know trees the way Ben did. He could name every species in the county. I just knew wood and not wood. I set the saw against the bark and pulled the trigger. The chain bit in. Wood chips flew. The noise was enormous and violent and exactly what I needed. Every pass of the saw felt like an answer. You think you can bury me? You think I'll just give up? You think I don't know how to fight? I didn't know what I was doing. Not really. I was just cutting. Carving chunks out of the stump like I was carving chunks out of Jack Creighton. Sweat ran down my face. My arms burned. The cut on my foot had opened up again. I kept cutting. And then I stopped. Because I'd hit something. Not dirt. Not rock. Something inside the stump. Something that looked like a shelf. A pale, leathery shelf of something growing out of the heartwood. Mushrooms. I killed the saw. The sudden silence was shocking. My ears rang. I knelt down in the dirt and looked closer. They were small. Clustered. Pale brown caps with creamy undersides. I didn't know mushrooms. I knew steak and potatoes and the occasional salad when Charlene guilted me into it. But Ben had known mushrooms. He'd talked about them the way other men talked about football. With reverence. With obsession. There was a book in the house somewhere. He'd left it on the nightstand for months. Gourmet mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest. I'd teased him about it. Told him he was turning into a hippie. I went back to the house. Found the book. Flipped through pages stained with coffee and marked with his terrible handwriting. Hen of the woods. Not what I had. Chanterelle. No. Oyster. No. Shiitake. I stopped. Read the entry twice. 3 times. Grows on hardwood logs and stumps. Prized in Asian cuisine. Commands premium prices. Can be cultivated by inoculating fresh-cut hardwood with spore plugs. I looked up. Looked out the window at the pasture. At the 37 stumps. 37 hardwood stumps. Fresh cut. Already sprouting. I started laughing again. That same crazy laugh from earlier. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like a plan. Jack Creighton had tried to bury me in trash. He'd dumped his garbage on my land and expected me to drown in it. He'd forgotten one thing. I was married to Benjamin Tully. The man who could fix anything. The man who read mushroom books in bed. The man who'd left me a chainsaw named Bertha and a head full of half-remembered conversations about fungal spores. I grabbed my phone. Called Charlene. I need you to pull every health code, cottage food law, and agricultural regulation in the state. Also, do you know anything about farmers markets? What are you going to do, Meg? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd just remembered she had nothing left to lose. I'm going to sell mushrooms for $40 a pound and make Jack Creighton wish he'd never heard my name. Charlene was quiet for 2 seconds. I'll have the files ready by morning. That night, I sat on the porch with my 2 beers. One for me. One for Ben's empty chair. The stumps were dark shapes in the distance. Monsters. Monuments. Money. Okay, Ben, I said, toasting the empty chair. Tell me about mushrooms. The wind stirred. It smelled like pine and cold and something else. Something rich and dark and alive. And somewhere in the darkness, the mushrooms kept growing. They sent the sheriff 3 days later. I was in the shed when I heard the cruiser crunch up the gravel drive. I'd been building inoculation frames from scrap lumber. My hands were covered in sawdust. My hair was tied back with a rubber band I'd found in Ben's toolbox. I looked like a woman who'd stopped caring about looking like anything. Sheriff Tom Bradley had been the law in Coldwater Reach for 22 years. He was tall and slow and wore a mustache that made him look like a walrus who'd given up on life. He'd gone to high school with my mom. He'd played poker with Ben every third Thursday. He'd cried at the funeral. Real tears. The kind you can't fake. But he was standing on my porch with a piece of paper in his hand and an expression that said he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Maggie, he said. I've got a complaint here. From who? Jack Creighton. Says you've been threatening his employees. And that you're operating an unlicensed agricultural business. I wiped my hands on my jeans. Threatening his employees? Tom, I screamed at a truck driver who was dumping garbage on my land. That's not a threat. That's a reasonable response to garbage. And the business? Show me the complaint. He handed me the paper. It was typed on Creighton Industries letterhead. The language was formal and precise and absolutely ridiculous. Cultivation of commercial fungi without proper permits. Illegal use of designated wood waste. Public nuisance. I laughed. Tom, I've got 37 stumps on my property. Some of them happen to have mushrooms growing on them. I haven't sold a single mushroom yet. I'm still building the frames. Yet? I looked up at him. Yet. He took off his hat. Rubbed his forehead. The gesture of a man who'd spent too many years dealing with problems that didn't have clean solutions. Maggie, I'm going to tell you something off the record. Jack Creighton is not a man you want as an enemy. He's got lawyers. He's got the county board. He's got money. I've got mushrooms. Maggie. Tom, did you know that fresh shiitake mushrooms sell for $40 a pound at the farmer's market in Missoula? Did you know that a single oak stump can produce 25 pounds of mushrooms a year? Did you know that Creighton just handed me 37 potential mushroom farms and delivered them to my door for free? He stared at me. The paper hung limp in his hand. You're serious. I'm a widow with a busted fence, a dead husband, and nothing left to lose. I am the most serious woman you have ever met. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he folded the complaint and tucked it into his pocket. I never saw this, he said. Never saw what? There was a pileup on Route 12. I got called away. Missed my chance to serve the papers. He turned to go, then stopped. Maggie. Be careful. I'm always careful. No, he said. You're not. That's what I like about you. That's what Ben liked about you. Just, don't get dead. He tipped his hat and walked back to his cruiser. I watched him drive away. Then I went back to the shed and finished building my frames. The first spore plugs arrived 2 weeks later. I'd ordered them from a supplier in Oregon. Shiitake. Oyster. Lion's mane. 500 plugs. Each one a tiny wooden dowel inoculated with mushroom spawn. They came in a cardboard box that smelled like earth and mystery. I spent 3 days drilling holes in the stumps. Bent over Bertha's cousin, a cordless drill Ben had bought at a Home Depot on a road trip we'd taken through Idaho. The drilling was slow work. My shoulders ached. My hands cramped. But every hole I drilled felt like I was putting another bullet in the chamber. Charlene came by on the second day. She stood at the fence with a coffee in each hand, watching me work. "You look like a crazy person," she said. "I feel like a crazy person." "Good. Crazy is working for you." She handed me the coffee. I drank it standing up. The steam mixed with the cold air. The pasture was starting to look like a battlefield. Holes drilled in every stump. Sawdust everywhere. The frames I'd built stacked and waiting. "I found something interesting," Charlene said. "What?" "That geological survey Creighton commissioned? The one about the aquifer?" "It wasn't about water." "Not really." She pulled a folded paper from her purse. "It was about helium." I stopped drinking. "Helium? There's a pocket under your land." "A big one." Helium prices have tripled in the last 5 years. Medical equipment. Tech manufacturing. Space industry. Your land is sitting on a gold mine, and Creighton's been trying to buy it for pennies. I set down the coffee. Walked to the nearest stump. Ran my hand over the rough bark. So the stumps aren't just about making me sell. They're about making me sell cheap. And fast. Before anyone else figures out what's underground. "How much is it worth?" Charlene's face split into a grin. "Conservative estimate? 7 million. Maybe 10. I picked up the drill. Pressed it to the stump. Squeezed the trigger. The bit sank into the wood with a satisfying whine. Then I guess I'd better grow some really expensive mushrooms. The next month was a blur of work and waiting and fighting off the constant little attacks Creighton sent my way. A county inspector showed up, asking about my commercial operation. I showed him the cottage food exemption Charlene had found. He left looking disappointed. A banker called, offering to help with my financial situation. I told him I was doing just fine. He didn't call back. A for sale sign appeared at the edge of my property. I tore it down. It reappeared. I tore it down again, and this time I mailed the pieces to Creighton's office with a note that said, "Lose my address." Charlene called it death by 1,000 paper cuts. She wasn't wrong. But every time Creighton poked me, I just drilled another hole. Planted another plug. Watched the white threads of mycelium spread through the wood like veins. And then, one morning in late October, I walked out to the pasture and found mushrooms. They were beautiful. Clusters of shiitake, their brown caps splitting open like little umbrellas. Clumps of oyster mushrooms, pale and delicate, cascading down the sides of the stumps like frozen waterfalls. Lion's mane puffing out in white clouds, looking exactly like its name. I knelt in the dirt. Reached out. Touched one of the shiitake caps. It was smooth and cool and absolutely real. "Well, I'll be damned," I whispered. I harvested 23 pounds that first day. Packed them in cardboard boxes lined with damp paper towels. Loaded them into Ben's old pickup, the one that still smelled like his cigarettes and his sweat and the cheap air freshener he'd hung from the rearview mirror. The farmer's market in Missoula was a 2-hour drive. I made it in an hour and 45 minutes, the truck rattling and wheezing the whole way. I set up a folding table. Arranged my mushrooms in neat rows. Wrote a price on a piece of cardboard with a Sharpie: fresh shiitake, $15 per pound; oyster, $12 per pound; lion's mane, $18 per pound. Ask me why they're special. People asked. I told them about the Stumps. About Creighton. About a widow who'd turned garbage into gold. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't play the victim. I just told the truth, and the truth was a good story. By noon, I was sold out. Charlene posted a photo on the town Facebook group. A picture of me standing behind my table, holding a cluster of shiitake, grinning like a woman who'd just discovered fire. The caption read, "From Jack's trash to Maggie's cash. Come get some." It got 400 shares by nightfall. The next market, there was a line before I even set up. People came from Missoula and Hamilton and as far away as Bozeman. They wanted mushrooms. They wanted the story. They wanted to be part of something that felt like justice. I was happy to sell them both. But Jack Creighton wasn't done. I knew that. Men like Jack didn't lose gracefully. They escalated. They got mean. They used every tool they had and invented new ones when the old ones broke. I'd seen it before. Not with land. Not with mushrooms. But with men. With power. With the kind of slow, grinding cruelty that wears people down until there's nothing left but a signature on a dotted line. I was waiting for his next move. It came on a Thursday, just after sunset. I was in the kitchen, packing mushroom orders for the weekend market. The radio was playing old country. George Jones. Ben's favorite. I was humming along, my hands moving on autopilot, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Too heavy for Charlene's Honda. Too slow for the sheriff's cruiser. I walked to the window. Pulled back the curtain. A black Escalade. Polished to a mirror shine. Idling in my driveway like it owned the place. The door opened. A man stepped out. Tall. Expensive coat. Hair that cost more than my truck. Jack Creighton. He smiled when he saw me at the window. Raised his hand in a friendly wave. Started walking toward the porch. I grabbed my phone. Turned on the voice recorder. Slipped it into my back pocket. Then I went to meet the devil at my door. He walked up the porch steps like he owned them. Like he'd walked up those steps 100 times and would walk up them 100 more. His boots were polished. His jeans were pressed. His smile was the kind of smile that had been practiced in front of mirrors and boardrooms and anywhere else men like him practiced looking like they weren't predators. Mrs. Tully. He said my name like it was a gift he was giving me. Jack Creighton. I believe we have some business to discuss. I didn't open the screen door. I stood behind it, arms crossed, my thumb rubbing slow circles on my wedding ring. Do we? I think we do. May I come in? No. The smile flickered. Just for a second. Then it was back, brighter than before. The kind of bright that meant he was annoyed and trying not to show it. Fair enough. I'll get right to it, then. I'm prepared to offer you a very generous price for this property. Above market value. Cash. Close in 30 days. You walk away with enough money to start fresh anywhere you want. Anywhere I want. Anywhere. What if I want to stay here? The smile tightened. He adjusted his cuff. A small motion. Almost unconscious. But I saw it. Mrs. Tully, let's be honest with each other. This land isn't doing you any good. Your husband passed. The ranch hasn't turned a profit in 2 years. You're out here alone, scraping by, selling mushrooms at a farmer's market like some kind of. He paused, searching for the right word. Hobbyist. Hobbyist. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a reality check. You're a smart woman. You know this place is too much for one person to handle. I pushed open the screen door. Stepped onto the porch. He took a half step back. Not because he was scared. Because I'd changed the script. Men like Jack Creighton expected you to stay behind the door. They expected you to hide. The mushrooms you're calling a hobby? They made me $4,000 last month. This month I've got pre-orders for 6. By spring, I'll be supplying 3 restaurants in Missoula and a specialty grocer in Bozeman. And I'm doing it all from the stumps your trucks dumped on my dead husband's pasture. His smile finally died. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. I pulled out my phone. Held it up so he could see the screen. I've been recording this conversation since you pulled into my driveway. So let's try again. What do you really want, Mr. Creighton? And don't say you're here out of the goodness of your heart. My husband used to say that men like you don't have hearts. Just calculators that look like hearts. He stared at the phone. Then at me. Something shifted behind his eyes. The mask slipped, just a little, and I saw what was underneath. Not a monster. Something worse. A man who genuinely believed he was the hero of his own story. You want the truth? Fine. There's helium under this land. A lot of it. I've got buyers lined up. Big buyers. The kind of buyers who can bring jobs to this county. Real jobs. Not mushroom stands and bake sales. This town is dying, Mrs. Tully. You know it. I know it. Everyone who's still sober by noon knows it. I'm trying to save it. By stealing my land. By purchasing your land. At a fair price. So I can build something that matters. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The laugh just came out, sharp and sudden as a sneeze. You sound like a politician. I'm running for county council. I know. Charlene told me. Charlene Baker? He said her name like it tasted bad. She's been pulling files on me for weeks. Did you know that? County records. Property deeds. Old permits. She's got quite the little investigation going. Good for her. It's harassment. It's public records. You should know. You wrote half of them. He stepped closer. Not threatening. Not yet. But the space between us got smaller. I came here to do this the easy way. One offer. One price. One clean transaction. You take the money, I take the land, everybody wins. Except my husband is still dead. Except your company's negligence killed him. Except you never paid a dime for it. The words hung in the air between us. Cold and hard and undeniable. Ben had been working a contract job for Creighton Logging when the accident happened. A cable snapped. A load shifted. The investigation said mechanical failure. No one was held responsible. No one was charged. The settlement my lawyer managed to squeeze out of their insurance company barely covered the funeral. Jack Creighton's face didn't change. But his hands did. He adjusted his cuff again. Tugged at it. Smoothed it down. That was a tragic accident. Accidents don't happen when you maintain your equipment. Accidents happen when you cut corners. When you skip inspections. When you put profit over people. You can't prove that. Maybe not. But I can prove what you're doing now. The stumps. The ordnance. The helium survey. I stepped forward. He stepped back. You tried to bury me in garbage, Jack. You tried to run me off my own land. And when that didn't work, you showed up here with a smile and a checkbook, expecting me to roll over like a good little widow. I'm offering you a way out. I don't want a way out. I want you to understand something. I pointed past him, toward the pasture. Toward the stumps. Toward the little mushroom farm that was growing out of his garbage. Every single mushroom I sell has your name on it. Every dollar I make is a dollar you handed me. Every person who hears my story learns exactly what kind of man Jack Creighton is. And you can't buy that back. You can't paper it over with county ordinances or lowball offers or campaign donations. It's out there. Growing. Spreading. Like mycelium. He stared at me for a long moment. His jaw was tight. His hands were still. But his eyes were moving. Calculating. Recalculating. Trying to find an angle he hadn't tried yet. This isn't over, he said. I know. You think you've won something. You haven't. You've just made it harder on yourself. I've been making things harder on myself my whole life. It's kind of my thing. He turned to go. Stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Looked back at me. Your husband was a good man. I want you to know that. He showed up on time. Worked hard. Never complained. It's a shame what happened. He said it like he meant it. Maybe he did. Maybe that was the worst part. Don't, I said. Don't you dare talk about my husband. He adjusted his cuff one more time. Then he walked to his Escalade, climbed in, and drove away. I stood on the porch until his taillights disappeared. Then I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording. I sent it to Charlene. Her reply came 30 seconds later, holy shit. I'm coming over. She arrived with a bottle of whiskey and a folder thick as a Bible. The whiskey was for me. The folder was ammunition. She spread the papers across my kitchen table while I poured 2 fingers into a coffee mug. It was the Air Force mug. Ben's mug. I figured he'd approve. Okay, Charlene said. Here's what I've got. Creighton's been a busy boy. Not just with your land. He's got deals in the works for half the county. Helium extraction rights. Water rights. Timber contracts. And he's been funding his campaign with money from a shell company registered in Delaware. Is that illegal? It's not illegal. But it's definitely the kind of thing voters don't like. Especially when the shell company turns out to be connected to a fracking operation that got fined for contaminating groundwater in Wyoming 2 years ago. I took a long drink of whiskey. Let it burn. What else? He's been pressuring the county assessor to lowball property values on the land he wants to buy. 3 of the 4 farms he's already acquired were assessed at 30% below market value right before he made his offers. The assessor's in on it? He's Creighton's nephew. Of course he is. And then there's this. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was old. Yellowed. A transport manifest. Otis Brewer gave this to me. Otis? The old guy who sits in the corner at the diner? The same. He worked at Creighton's sawmill for 30 years before he retired. He knows where all the bodies are buried. Figuratively speaking. She tapped the manifest. This is from 6 years ago. It shows a shipment of diesel-soaked soil being transported from Creighton's mill to a disposal site. Except the disposal site listed doesn't exist. It's just coordinates. And those coordinates are about half a mile upstream from your property. I set down the mug. Diesel-soaked soil. There's more. Otis says there were dozens of these shipments. All of them fake disposal sites. All of them near the creek. He says Creighton was dumping contaminated soil for years. Saving money on proper disposal. Letting it leach into the groundwater. Into the creek that runs through my land. Into the creek that runs through your land. I stared at the manifest. At the coordinates. At the careful, bureaucratic handwriting of some truck driver who'd probably never known what he was hauling. Can we prove it? Otis has copies of everything. Manifests. Internal memos. An email from Creighton himself telling the site manager to, quote, handle disposal costs creatively. Why is he giving us this now? Charlene poured herself a whiskey. Took a sip. Winced. Because he liked your husband. Because he's been waiting for someone to stand up to Creighton for 20 years. Because he's old and he's dying and he wants to do one decent thing before he goes. How long? Cancer. A year. Maybe less. I looked out the window. The moon was up. It silvered the pasture and the stumps and the little mushroom frames I'd built with my own hands. The county debate, I said. Next Thursday. At the high school gym. What about it? Creighton's going to be there. The whole town's going to be there. The press. The voters. Everyone. Charlene's eyes lit up. You want to crash it. I want to end it. I want to stand up in front of everyone and show them exactly who they're about to elect. We'd need everything. The manifests. The assessor's numbers. The shell company. The Wyoming fine. We'd need it all wrapped up in a package so tight he can't wriggle out of it. Can we do that? Charlene grinned. I've been waiting my whole life for a moment like this. Give me 3 days. The next 3 days were chaos. I kept working the mushroom farm. The orders didn't stop just because I was preparing to destroy a man's career. If anything, the farm was my anchor. The thing that kept me sane while Charlene built the bomb. Every morning I walked the pasture. Checked the spore plugs. Harvested the ready caps. Packed the boxes. Every afternoon I called Charlene and listened to her update me on the case we were building. Otis came by on the second day. He drove up in a truck so old it made Ben's pickup look new. He didn't come to the door. Just stood at the edge of the pasture, looking at the stumps. I walked out to meet him. Mr. Brewer. Mrs. Tully. He paused. 2 seconds. Exactly 2 seconds. Your husband showed me how to sharpen a chainsaw once. Good man. Patient. Thank you. I should have said something sooner. About Creighton. About what he was doing. I was scared. Then I was sick. Then I figured it was too late. He looked at the manifest in my hand. It's not too late, is it? No. It's not too late. He nodded. Looked at the stumps. At the mushrooms. He dumped these here to break you. You know that, right? I know. Instead you turned them into a farm. That's something. Thank you. He nodded again. Turned to go. Stopped. Thursday night. Make sure you've got copies for everyone. The press. The council. Don't let him spin it. Don't let him smile his way out. Men like Creighton, they think they're untouchable. You've got to touch them hard. I will. He walked back to his truck. Drove away. The night before the debate, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch with 2 beers. One for me. One for Ben's chair. The stumps were dark shapes in the moonlight. The mushrooms were still growing. Quiet and steady and unstoppable. I wish you were here, I said to the empty chair. You'd know what to say. You always knew what to say. The wind stirred. It smelled like pine and cold and something rich and alive. I'm scared, Ben. Not of Creighton. I'm scared of what happens after. After I do this. After everyone knows. What if they still don't care? What if he still wins? The chair didn't answer. But I felt something. Maybe it was the whiskey. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was just the memory of Ben's hand on my shoulder, the way he'd always touched me when I was spiraling. Gentle. Steady. Present. You're right, I said. I'm being stupid. I've got 37 stumps and a chainsaw named Bertha. What's one county debate? I finished my beer. Went inside. Laid out my clothes for the next day. Not my market clothes. Not my work clothes. My dress uniform from the Air Force. Clean. Pressed. Ready. Thursday arrived cold and clear. The high school gym was packed. Folding chairs in neat rows. A stage at the front with a podium and 2 microphones. Banners hanging from the rafters. Vote for progress. Creighton for council. The air smelled like floor wax and nervous sweat and the faint metallic tang of old radiators. Charlene and I arrived early. We sat in the 3rd row. She had a briefcase full of copies. I had my phone in my pocket. Otis was in the back corner, looking small and tired and determined. Jack Creighton took the stage at 7 o'clock sharp. He wore a blue suit and a red tie and the same practiced smile he'd worn on my porch. He shook hands with the moderator. Shook hands with the other candidates. Sat down at the table like he'd already won. The debate was boring for the first hour. Questions about road maintenance. Questions about school funding. Questions about zoning. Creighton answered them all with the same smooth confidence. He talked about jobs. About progress. About making Coldwater reach great again. And then the moderator asked about environmental policy. I believe in responsible development, Creighton said. I believe we can grow our economy while protecting our natural resources. My company has always followed every regulation. Every law. Every ordinance. I stood up. That's a lie. Every head in the gym turned. The moderator blinked. Creighton's smile froze. Mrs. Tully, the moderator said. This is a forum for candidates. If you have a question, you can submit it like everyone else. I don't have a question. I have evidence. I held up the folder. Evidence that Jack Creighton has been illegally dumping contaminated soil on private land for years. Evidence that he's been manipulating property assessments to steal farms. Evidence that he's funding his campaign with money from a shell company connected to a fracking operation that poisoned groundwater in Wyoming. The gym erupted. People stood up. Phones came out. Someone shouted, "Let her speak." Creighton leaned into his microphone. This is absurd. This woman has a personal vendetta against me. She's been harassing my employees, squatting on land she can't afford, running an unlicensed business out of her backyard. She's not credible. I've got the manifests. I've got the emails. I've got the assessor's numbers. I've got everything. I walked toward the stage. Charlene followed, handing out copies to every person she passed. Ask yourself why Jack Creighton is so desperate to buy my land. It's not about jobs. It's about helium. It's about what's underneath the ground. And it's about what he's been dumping into the creek that runs through my property for years. You can't prove any of that. I don't have to prove it. I pointed to the back of the room. He does. Otis Brewer stood up. He was shaking. But his voice was steady. I worked for Creighton Logging for 30 years, he said. I drove the trucks. I kept the records. And I can tell you everything. The gym went silent. Creighton's face went white. And somewhere in my pocket, my phone was recording the whole thing. The gym erupted. Not the polite murmur of a town meeting. Not the shuffling discomfort of people who'd rather be somewhere else. This was a roar. A living, breathing thing made of gasps and shouts and the scrape of folding chairs as people jumped to their feet. Otis Brewer walked down the center aisle. He was 68 years old. He had cancer eating through his bones. He weighed maybe 140 pounds soaking wet. But he walked like a man who'd been waiting 20 years for permission to tell the truth. I've got the records, Otis said. His voice was thin but it carried. 37 shipments. 37 fake disposal sites. All of them along the creek. All of them upstream from Maggie Tully's land. Creighton grabbed his microphone. This man is a disgruntled former employee. He was fired for insubordination in 2014 and he's been nursing a grudge ever since. Nothing he says can be trusted. I wasn't fired. Otis didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. I retired. Full pension. I've got the paperwork for that too. Charlene was still moving through the crowd, handing out copies. The photocopied manifests. The internal emails. The Wyoming fracking fine. The Shell Company registration in Delaware. She'd organized everything into neat little packets. Stapled. Highlighted. Impossible to ignore. A man in the front row stood up. He was wearing a VFW cap. Vietnam. His hands were shaking. "I've got a question for Mr. Creighton," he said. "My grandson drinks water from a well on Kowalski's old place. You telling me that water's been poisoned and you knew about it?" Creighton's smile was gone now. Completely. His face was the color of old milk. "I can assure you that all Creighton Industries operations are fully compliant with." "I don't want compliance. I want to know if my grandson's been drinking diesel." The gym went quiet again. That deep, dangerous quiet that comes right before something breaks. Otis pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. Unfolded it slowly. Held it up. "This is a water quality report. From 2019. It shows elevated levels of benzene in 3 wells along the creek. All 3 wells are downstream from the disposal sites." The report was sent to Creighton Industries. No action was taken. A woman in the back screamed. Not a word. Just a sound. Raw and animal. She was holding one of Charlene's packets. Her face was wet. "That's my well," she said. "That's my house. My daughter's been sick for 2 years. They said it was allergies. They said it was asthma. They said." She couldn't finish. A man beside her caught her as her knees buckled. The county sheriff stood up. Tom Bradley. The walrus mustache. The tired eyes. He wasn't tired now. "Mr. Creighton," he said. "I think you'd better come with me. I'm not going anywhere. This is a political attack. These documents are forgeries. This woman," he pointed at me. His finger was shaking. "She's been out to get me since her husband died. She's turned this whole town against me with her lies and her mushrooms and her." "Jack." The sheriff's voice was quiet. Almost gentle. "Stop talking." The other candidates had already left the stage. Their chairs were empty. Their banners hung limp and forgotten. It was just Creighton up there now. Alone. His red tie askew. His cuff undone. He adjusted it. Pulled at it. Smoothed it down. "You'll regret this," he said. Not to the sheriff. Not to Otis. To me. All of you. "You'll regret this. I built this town. I employed half the people in this room. You think you can destroy me with some old papers and a sob story? I'm not destroying you, Jack." I walked to the edge of the stage. Looked up at him. "You destroyed yourself. I just brought the receipts." His eyes went flat. Dead. The eyes of a man who'd never lost anything in his life and didn't know how to start. The sheriff took his arm. He didn't resist. He just kept staring at me as they walked him out of the gym. Past the folding chairs. Past the banners. Past the people he'd employed and cheated and poisoned. Someone started clapping. Then someone else. Then the whole gym was clapping and I was standing in the middle of it, Charlene's hand on my shoulder, Otis wheezing quietly in the corner, the flash of phone cameras catching everything. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a woman who'd finally, after 12 months of drowning, found something solid to stand on. The video went viral. Of course it did. Charlene had been live-streaming the whole thing on her phone. By midnight, the clip had 40,000 views. By morning, 100,000. News vans started showing up in Coldwater Reach. Reporters with perfect hair and imperfect questions. They wanted the story of the widow and the mushrooms and the evil logging tycoon. I gave them the story. But I made sure Otis was in it. I made sure the names of the families with poisoned wells were in it. I made sure it wasn't just about me. The EPA showed up 3 days later. Actual federal agents with badges and clipboards and hazmat suits. They took soil samples. Water samples. They interviewed Otis for 6 hours. They interviewed me for 2. The county assessor resigned. Creighton's nephew. He packed up his office on a Thursday and was gone by Friday. No one knew where. The county board held an emergency meeting and repealed Ordinance 7-14. The vote was unanimous. And Jack Creighton? He was out on bail. Waiting for his day in court. His campaign was dead. His company was under investigation. His wife had apparently left him and taken the dogs. Charlene found that part particularly satisfying. But I knew him well enough by then to know he wasn't done. Men like Jack Creighton didn't go quietly. They burned everything down on their way out. He came for me on a Tuesday night. I was in the shed, cleaning Bertha's air filter. The radio was playing old country again. Hank Williams this time. I'm so lonesome I could cry. Ben had always said Hank understood heartbreak better than any man alive. I heard the trucks before I saw the headlights. 3 of them. Coming fast up the dirt road. Too fast. The kind of fast that meant trouble. I grabbed Bertha. Grabbed my phone. Ran to the house. The first rock hit the kitchen window before I made it inside. Glass exploded across the counter. Shards skittered across the floor. I dropped to my knees, heart hammering, phone already dialing 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's attacking my property. 3 trucks. They're throwing rocks. I'm at 417, Coldwater Road. Units are on the way. Stay on the line. I stayed on the line. But I didn't stay inside. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was the Air Force training I hadn't used in 10 years. Maybe it was just that I was done hiding. Done waiting. Done letting men like Jack Creighton push me around. I walked out onto the porch with Bertha in my hands. The trucks had stopped at the edge of the pasture. Men were getting out. 6 of them. Maybe 7. I recognized some of the faces. Creighton's crew. The ones who'd dumped the Stumps. The ones who'd laughed at me. And there, in the middle of them, was Jack Creighton himself. No expensive coat now. No polished boots. Just a man with nothing left to lose. You cost me everything, he shouted. His voice was raw. Broken. My company. My campaign. My wife. Everything. You cost yourself everything. I just helped. He stepped forward. The men behind him moved with him. They were carrying tools. Crowbars. Baseball bats. A can of gasoline. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. But my hands were steady. Bertha's weight was solid and familiar. You're making a mistake, I said. You're the one who made a mistake. You should have taken the money. I'm recording this conversation. Just like last time. And the 911 operator is listening. So is the sheriff. So is the FBI, probably, since they've been monitoring your phone since the debate. That stopped him. His face twitched. You're lying. Am I? I held up my phone. The screen was lit. The call timer was still running. Sheriff Bradley, you can come out now. Nothing happened for 1 heartbeat. 2. Then headlights flooded the pasture. Not cop lights. Just headlights. Tom Bradley's cruiser pulled up behind the trucks. Then another car. Then another. Half the town, it seemed like, had followed the sheriff up my driveway. Tom got out of his cruiser. His hand was on his gun. His mustache was bristling. Jack, he said. Tell your boys to put down the tools. Creighton looked at the sheriff. At the cars. At the people getting out of them. Charlene was there. Otis was there. The VFW guy from the debate was there, and this time he was carrying a shotgun. "It's over, Jack," I said. "Go home. Wait for your trial. Don't make this worse." He stood there for a long time. His men were looking at each other. Looking at the crowd. Looking at the sheriff's hand on his gun. The baseball bat clattered to the ground. Then the crowbar. Then the gas can. One by one, they backed away. Creighton was alone. "You'll never win," he said. "I already have." He adjusted his cuff. One last time. Then he turned and walked back to his truck. The sheriff arrested him in my driveway. Handcuffs. Miranda rights. The whole thing. Charlene filmed every second of it. The video got 2 million views before the weekend was over. The trial took 8 months. The federal charges came first. Illegal disposal of hazardous waste. Violation of the Clean Water Act. Conspiracy to commit fraud. The evidence Otis had provided was ironclad. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The state charges came next. Property damage. Criminal harassment. Attempted arson. Guilty. 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 Jack Creighton was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His company was dissolved. His assets were seized. The families with the poisoned wells got a settlement. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. But it was something. The helium rights under my land? I sold them to a clean energy company from Oregon. They paid me $7.2 million. I used some of it to fix the fence. The rest I put into a trust for the families who'd been sick. Otis Brewer died 6 months after the trial. He went peacefully, in his own bed, with a view of the mountains he'd looked at his whole life. I held his hand at the end. He didn't say much. He never did. But just before he went, he squeezed my fingers and smiled. "Your husband would be proud," he said. Those were his last words. I think about them a lot. The farm changed after everything settled down. I kept the mushroom business. Expanded it, actually. Hired 3 employees. Built a proper processing shed. Started selling to restaurants in 3 states. The brand I'd built on spite had turned into something real. Something lasting. The Stumps kept producing. Year after year. Shiitake and oyster and lion's mane, pushing up through the wood Jack Creighton had tried to bury me with. Every mushroom was a little victory. Every harvest was a reminder. Charlene quit her job at the county records office and came to work for me full-time. She handles marketing and distribution and occasionally yells at suppliers who try to overcharge us. She's very good at yelling. The sheriff retired. Tom Bradley turned in his badge and bought a little cabin up by Flathead Lake. He comes by once a month to buy mushrooms and sit on the porch and talk about Ben. He still has the mustache. And as for me? I'm still here. Still in the same house. Still drinking 2 beers on Friday nights, one for me and one for Ben's empty chair. But the chair doesn't feel as empty as it used to. I took the biggest stump on the property, the one where I found those first mushrooms, and I moved it to the front of the farm. Right by the road. Right where everyone can see it. I carved a little plaque and nailed it to the wood. It says, "Second chances grow here. Free mushrooms for anyone who needs them." Every week, people come by. Some of them are neighbors. Some of them drive from hours away. They've heard the story. They've seen the videos. They want to see the stump for themselves. They want to touch it. They want to take a mushroom home and cook it and taste something that grew out of garbage and became something good. I let them. Sometimes they ask me about Jack Creighton. About the trial. About whether I hate him. I tell them the truth. I did hate him. For a long time. I hated him for what he did to Ben. For what he did to the land. For what he tried to do to me. But hate is like a stump. It's heavy and ugly and it takes up space where something better could grow. So I inoculated it. Same as the mushrooms. I drilled holes in my hate and plugged it with work and time and the people I loved. And eventually, something else started growing. Something I didn't have a name for yet. Not forgiveness. Not exactly. Maybe just the understanding that holding on to pain is like holding on to a hot coal. The only person who gets burned is you. The sun was setting on a Friday evening in October. The air was cold and clean and smelled like pine. I was sitting on the porch with 2 beers. One for me. One for the chair. The mushroom farm was quiet. The stumps were dark shapes against the fading light. The plaque on the big stump caught the last of the sun and glowed like a little ember. I touched my wedding ring. Rubbed my thumb over the worn gold. Thought about Ben. About his laugh. About the way he'd always believed I was stronger than I thought I was. Told you I'd fix it, I said to the empty chair. The wind stirred. It moved through the pines and the stumps and the little mushroom frames. It smelled like earth and growth and something rich and alive. And somewhere in the pasture, a new cluster of mushrooms was pushing up through the bark. I lifted my beer to the sky. To Ben. To Otis. To everyone who'd helped me get here. Second chances, I said. They grow where you plant them. I drank. The beer was cold and bitter and perfect. And for the first time in 2 years, I smiled. Not a crazy smile. Not a sad smile. Just a real one. The kind that starts small and spreads slow. The kind that means you've been through something terrible and come out the other side. The kind that means you're going to be okay. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked. A truck rumbled past. The lights of Coldwater Reach flickered on, one by one, tiny pinpricks of warmth in the vast Montana dark. I finished my beer. Stood up. Touched the porch railing, the one Ben had never gotten around to fixing. The wood was smooth and cold under my fingers. Tomorrow I'd fix it myself. Tomorrow I'd do a lot of things. But tonight, I was just going to sit here a little longer. In the quiet. In the cold. In the company of ghosts and mushrooms and the land I'd fought for. The land that was finally, completely, undeniably mine. A single mushroom cap, pale and round, was pushing up through a crack in the porch step. I hadn't planted it there. It had just shown up. Like it wanted to be close to the house. Close to me. I knelt down. Touched it gently. It was cool and smooth and alive. Welcome home, I said. And somewhere, I swear, Ben laughed.